Thank you, Ross. Oh, and we
Now
are
it's
recording
recording.
this. Thanks, Terry, for future posterity. So thank you all for being here. And there'll be a nice little section for Q&A. But first, we're going to let Ross kind of take over and do his thing. So thank you, Ross.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Terry, again for having me. Um, I kind of was thinking about the process of all of this, and I was having sushi the other night with my wife, and I thought about what it takes to make sushi in Japan.
Mm.
It takes 10 years for someone to make sushi, right? To become a sushi chef. And through that 10 years, it starts with basic tasks like dishwashing. Then you spend 2 years just on rice preparation, then another 2 years on fish preparation. And then, if you make it through all of that, then the head master chef will send you out to make sushi. And so, as I was trying to literally pull what I was eating into what I would be doing, I realized that sending someone out into the business world or as an entrepreneur without spending time working on the rice and washing the dishes and prepping the fish is like sending somebody to be a sushi chef, without any knowledge of how to put it together. Doesn't mean you can't actually do it. It just means that you're not going to put the piece of fish in front of the customer that maybe you thought you could. So, in the spirit of us being sushi chefs today, we're going to work on making a roll of sushi. What that means is we're going to go over a lot of the concepts covered in the book. And because this is a Q&A, it is my duty to allow some cues. But also in general, when it comes to reading and writing, I like to assume that there is a scale of people who are familiar with the book that ranges from I've read it to I am familiar with it. And by I am familiar with it, it means that you saw the name of the book in this invite. So you are all welcome. It does not matter. We're still going to cover a bunch of things. But if I were to distill the book down into one kind of question, uh, the question is why me? Right. Um, I think that that is something that I've asked myself a lot of times in a lot of scenarios. And I think that when it comes down to why we do what we do, that story of why me is probably the most paramount out of anything we can do. The most common thing I hear is, I don't have a story, right? Well, what if I didn't come from, rags to riches? What if I don't have these crazy, stories that we hear about? And I like to immediately invalidate that and say, you're here and you got here somehow. So you have a story. And I think a big part of what I've learned, especially through the venture capital world, is that people invest in people. There are ideas, there are a zillion ideas, but if you were to look at the formula of all the letters that go into making somebody successful or likable or honorable and ethical, in there is somewhere is talent. And I think that that T in that equation is probably the smallest of all of those letters. So when it comes to creating your story and investing in the time to tell your story, I think that what I have found is the ability to tell your story and understand that is actually paramount to your success. And if you don't spend the time washing dishes, learning how to make the rice, cutting the fish, and you just jump straight into I'm going to make sushi, right? I'm just going to start a business. My product's really great. Everyone's going to buy it. What happens is somewhere along the line, you make it a lot harder for yourself. And for those, of us that have had success as it comes and goes in life, we realize that the quality of our relationships are built on top of the authenticity that we bring into them. Certainly you've heard, well, if you do a good job, as a salesperson, you're not selling. That's the sweet spot, right? That's the authenticity we talk about. So, what we'll go over, and I think that, what I want to encourage you to do is I'll kind of just go through some of the chapters and the concepts. And if you have just questions, you can obviously put them in the chat. You're not going to interrupt me. But I think that what the differentiator here is, first of all, the structure of the book tells you what a story is, first of all, right? Understanding what a story is, what a good story is. And a good story is essentially an experience that people can relate or react to. So when we think about when we tell a story and we see, we get these data points in of people listening to us, usually if you've been to a location and someone's from there, well, boom, we have something that they can relate or react to. We've been to a restaurant, we've been to a conference, we've, worked at a restaurant before. These are all experiences that we can relate or react to. And our ability to identify the multitude of experiences we've had and understand the room that we're walking into and how to tell them and when to tell them, that again is paramount into making those authentic connections that we feel really, really good about. So I want to I'll pause for a hot second there while I bring up essentially like a flyover of basically the chapters of the book, and only to serve as structural of essentially how it works. So again, we start with what is a good story, right? So we've defined that. Within every story, I break that down into scenes. I spent 10 years as an improviser. I think now it's probably way more popular than when I was starting it. Back when I was starting it, this was like the dawn of whose line is it anyway, which will age myself a little bit. But that was kind of most people's first touch point with what exactly it meant to improvise. Very soon after, I think people started to realize that we were improvising all the time. And in business, the rules of building on top of and not chopping down is, again, one of these additive layers of success and confidence building and excitement that you get both internally and with your partners. So understanding what CROW is, right? CROW is a concept in improv that defines what a scene is and all the inputs that make a scene, whether we're aware or not. I talk about the 4 biggest questions of your life, which essentially builds your story no matter who you are. And those questions are essentially, who am I? How did I become that person? Who do I want to be? And how do I become that person? That's everybody's story. That's Batman's story. That's your story. That's my story. I talk about brands and how they've evolved over time to become essentially people themselves, especially because we find our identity in where we work now. When people ask you, when they introduce you in a room, usually they're starting with what you do for work. And again, people themselves are brands, right? Now we have like the dawn of influencers and all, like people are brands. And what is that line in between? And then that goes into authenticity. To me, this kind of word that floats around and is always on the cusp of an eye roll, right? But being able to maintain that authenticity. I talk about how to frame your story, basically where the way that you frame it kind of goes 3 ways. There's what you claim, what people think, and what is true. And if you draw that Venn diagram, that A is right in the middle, right? That's authenticity at its finest. But you can get away with 2 out of the 3 of those. Then, of course, if you have your story, you have to be able to find your audience, understanding the room you're walking into, right? Read the room, as they would say. So I think, understanding the difference of where you are and how that dictates your story are also very important for your success. Understanding how to tailor it, right? Where I'm not in here talking on a stage with 500 people. That would be a very different delivery than what this is, which is very intimate, very fun. We can be candid with each other. We can ask questions. You're more likely to raise your hand here than you are in the auditorium. So again, understanding where you are and how to shape your story so that it fits. And then, of course, after all of this, there's that little illness that we all carry that they call imposter syndrome. And I think that overcoming that in your story, which is kind of where I started to say, well, I don't have a story. That's what everybody says to me. Well, I don't have one. And the second you start having conversations and finding those touch points, you start to realize that, you are where you are for a reason. And that reason, is justified in itself, not by other people, not by comparisons. And I think that acknowledging it, not, I think there's some people to say, I don't have it. No, it's okay. Some of these things you just have to acknowledge and move forward with. That I think that is kind of the button on all this, because I've had people get through all of it and say, tell myself, but I still feel like nobody believes me, or I don't belong here. And that's a never ending, that is not something that changes as much as it is you acknowledge it so that you free yourself of that kind of block from going there. So that's kind of my, 10-minute flyover here. And I think from there I will pause and let y'all fire away.
Awesome. Thanks, Ross. So just a little bit of housekeeping. You can ask questions either in the chat and we will get to them, or you can just come off mute and ask them when there's like a natural break in the conversation. So whichever way is your preference. I'll kick us off with a question about like what sparked your interest in the topic of storytelling? Like, why did you focus in there and decide this is something that I need to write a book about?
Yeah. So, like most things, they're happy accidents. This was, I think that we all are challenged with knowing what we know, but not really knowing how we know it. And what I realized, I was actually invited, my friend taught at Wharton for a couple of years, and she invited me after we had given the kids a tour. I was working at Red Bull at the time in New York, and I'd given the kids a tour of the office. They were doing, office tours in New York City. And it's all these business kids that, they went to JP Morgan and they went to all these, places that they're probably going to go work. And then they came to Red Bull and it was just a different world. And she was asking, the teacher, basically the feedback was, they were like, well, they kind of want to know more about what you do. And they don't really get exposure. Like none of them had never really been asked personal questions about their life and why they're doing it. Right. It was kind of like, oh, it's just what I do. It's what my dad did. It's like, it's high paying. It's like, which are reasons, right? But I think they're not really digging to the root, which people then find out later. They're like, I got into this thing and I was doing it for 10 years. And I realized like, I don't even want to do this thing. Like, why am I doing this thing? And so I think in there, I went over, I did the lecture series and it was just really fun. I've just found this recurring bit where I'm used to, filming people, again, lifelong producer, getting people to tell their stories. Again, now it's a little more like everyone does it. But in the old days, the idea of putting a CEO on camera and having them like tell you how they ended up there or their parents or their upbringing, this is very vulnerable stuff that has been, kind of changed over time, but it doesn't make it any easier. We still have to overcome these bits and pieces, and having the tools that we have in production, I think should be available to everybody. And so it just became very fun for me to talk about and use the Hollywoody background with kind of like this, business approach that most of us have to go through.
Awesome.
I will add that if people don't have questions, I'm going to start telling stories about other people on this chat. So you will have time.
Chris has a question in the chat.
This is your warning.
Chris just posted. Oh, go ahead.
Well, you have to have a filter on your. I'm sorry. The question is, any tips on how to be as attractive as you? First of all, you have to be in a really warm room so that you have a glow, that you have this nice sweaty glow across your forehead.
Okay. Are you any tips for the beard or anything like that?
I mean, you've got one going here. You and I are very different in that, I get rid of my little soul patch here. You keep yours. But other than that.
Ooh, you know what? I'm going to write that down. Okay, I did buy your book and I do plan on reading it. It sounds really interesting. So I don't have any questions about the book per se. I did ask ChatGPT for like a summary of the book. But I don't think it is indexed. So that's good news for you that it's not being stolen.
That's only indexed to 2023, mid 2023. So it wouldn't be there.
There you go. Yeah, I remember having a conversation with you on brand, and like you were like, big AI ethics guy. I thought I was the biggest AI nerd that I knew, but nope, you are. Speaking of AI nerdy stuff, have you been testing any of the Apple Intelligence features?
No, I think that, AI is very funny. Like, you're just constantly catching all the things that people are throwing at you. Right. And everyone is out there trying to make you believe that the thing that they're making is the breakthrough thing. But to me, I'm not seeing anything different from there that I would need that I'm like, oh, I've got to get that thing. That to me feels more like a ploy. Whereas a lot of the companies that are really in the weeds and doing interesting stuff, they're not doing the Apple stuff yet. Right. Because Apple's not ready to release that to the larger public.
Yeah, that was not related to to the book. So yeah, I just something I've been nerding out on.
We should keep nerding on about that. There's some really cool stuff. And I'm actually doing a Gen AI talk in 2 weeks. So there's a lot of really cool stuff on Gen AI. If let's wrap at it later.
Well,
We never followed up from the conference. So
I
we
actually
should-
did have a question about AI because I read your book and I saw in your little bio that I gave the spiel for that you do courses on ethics and AI. And what do you think about the role of AI in storytelling, and just what are your thoughts there?
Yeah. So like what a great crossover of my two versions of me. I actually talk about this a lot with people because there is people are, well, now they're just going to assume everything is written by AI, which is a good and a bad thing.
Right.
You know, it's bad because you're going to stop reading it. It's good because it empowers people to actually create and get them out of their wheelhouse. As it pertains to today's topic, no one can write your story, right? Like, you know, your lived experience is going to be more important and more personal than anything that you're going to ask chat or any AI to do or any assistant to do. And that's why it just goes back to, like, again, what is a good story? It's an experience that you can relate or react to. Every one of those words is important there, right? It's an experience. That means you have to live, right? If you're not out there and doing things and experiencing life, and you're just sitting there asking, you know, Chat or whoever, or Claude, you know, to all unearth all this information, it doesn't actually make you smarter, right? So when it comes to telling any story, you know, if there's anyone in here that's writing sales documents or RFPs or pitches, like, great, use it. But it is your 0 to 1. It's not your 0 to 100. So, you know, if you were to ask me, what is the line between ethical and non-ethical? Well, the line is like, are you being authentic to what you're presenting to other people? I use Chat as an editor. So I'm a think as I talk person. You know, in school, they say some people learn by reading and some people learn, you know, by writing. And I'm like, I learn just by talking. And I'm like, what am I? And like my multi-personalities start debating each other on what's actually happening. So, you know, you should use Chat as your editor. And if you get stuck as a writer, if you're not a good writer, you don't like to put things down, you don't like to type, like, it is now enabled you to literally just talk for 10 minutes and then say, synthesize what I've said into, you know, 3 cohesive paragraphs. And then it's going to give them to you. And then it's your duty to go, well, this sounds like a robot's writing it, and I'm not this good of a writer. So then you read it and you go, okay, I'm going to read this. And then I'm actually going to throw it away and I'm going to write based on what I remember what it wrote, right? So, you know, it's the same advice I would give to people who are like, oh, I'm going to use it to write my wedding speech. I'm like, well, bad idea, first of all. Right? But like, if you read what it, you know, you read anything and then you go, okay, let me throw that away. Let me throw my notes away. And then I know that I know it. And I know that I've even indexed it in my brain in like a note form. Now let me deliver it authentically. I think that's kind of the process of, how do we use this as a tool to 2x and 3x our capabilities and overcome all these things that, you know, maybe hold us back, or we tell ourselves, well, you know, I'm dyslexic, so I can't, you know, okay, great. Well, now you have things that can get you over that hump and get you to the place where you are able to refine those experiences into like a deliverable format that someone can relate and react to, so that we can enjoy the human connection.
Nice. Great answer.
I did something, Ross, last week or the week before, after our conversation, I had AI write my bio for me. And my bio was it was spot on. I mean, there was nothing incorrect. And I gave it no prompts. There was nothing incorrect. And it wrote my bio much better than what I mean, it made me sound a whole lot better than I am. And I was just floored at how, I hadn't done it yet. I was floored at how quickly AI could find me on the internet and be able to write my bio.
What a great opportunity for me to tell you that I also did that exact same thing. And I had it right. So it says, Terry leads Nebraska's advertising community, fostering professional growth and networking. A wine enthusiast, she enjoys hosting movie nights and supporting local wineries. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Whoa.
Advertising shines through her dedication to building creative communities. So what I actually went ahead and did was, I wanted to make a point that whether you like it or not, and this is an unintentional bridge, your story's out there, right? Like your story's out there. And that's from people who have written your bio, to posts you've made, to people who have similar names as you, to your LinkedIn, to indexed cached pages long, long ago, right? Now, what I did was I actually went through and I got a bio on everyone who was going to be here today. And instead of, it automatically, and again, think of, you are both the source material and the editor of your life, right? You're the source material. Everything that you're doing you're doing it, right? And a lot of things you'll remember. Sometimes you take notes, sometimes you write it down, sometimes you take pictures, sometimes other people take pictures of you, sometimes other people interview you, right? All of these things, they're just data points. And when you are now editing your bio, I could say, hey, give me a bio of Terry, and it would have done that, right? It would have said probably exactly what's either on, the Advertising Federation's website or on your LinkedIn. But then I was like, tell me more about, who they are as a person, and don't only use one source. So then it starts to do, the wine enthusiast, the movie nights. And then after all that, I say, well, I'd love to know, what is the common thread that brings everyone together that's showing up for this call? And it basically gave me 5 points. It said, there's a passion for community impact. So that means you all are good people. Congratulations. It is a storytelling and creative community. There's an interest in arts and personal growth. There's a focus among everyone's background on health and well-being. And everyone in the group is committed to mentorship and development, which means everyone in here is actually pretty great. Congratulations. So, when we think about now, when we say, well, I don't have a story, right? The answer is you do. And the answer is, if you're not telling it, somebody else is. So when I go back to that original question, right? If you remember, what was the original question that I asked, that I always ask, that I hope that this book allows you to answer? The question is, why me, right? Why me? Life is short. We can do whatever we want. We have a lot of choices, whether or not we acknowledge them. So this concept of why me is only answered when you're able to look at the life that you've lived, and then also understand where you came from, so you can understand where you want to go. And that arc in business, remember, people invest in people, right? They're not products. A lot of people invent the same thing. People invest in people, which is the same thing someone might ask you, right? If you're selling them something or you have a product, they would go, why you? So in there, you have to be able to articulate that question or that answer. And it's usually not, well, why this product? Why is this product better, right? It's why you. And I think understanding that both for yourself, and others, allows you to also forward look, right? If you were able to look backwards, then you're able to look forward. You got to know where you came from to know where you're going. And again, just like the way the chat will write a story, you could say, well, what's the next chapter for Terry, right? What's the next chapter for Aubrey? It would write you something, and it'd probably be pretty funny. And if we don't have another question, I'm actually going to ask chat, what happens next to,
I could ask you some questions. I got some,
Yeah.
I guess first question is, won't be AI related, but talk about personal branding, and like that goes, I feel like goes hand in hand with self promotion, and that goes hand in hand with storytelling and all that kind of stuff. One of the things I struggle with is like talking about myself, like, or feel like I'm being braggadocious online or whatever. Like I would prefer to just keep my head down, do the work, and do client stuff. So like I'm terrible at social media. I'm terrible at writing blog posts. I'm terrible at like putting new work we've done on my website. So like one of the questions I have for you is like, how much, I'm not the only one that does that, but like how much of like the storytelling and the self-promotion and all that kind of stuff, like where does that fall in on your day-to-day as like a priority level? And like, how do you make time, how do you ensure to make time for that and all,
Yeah, let me think for a second. I just had this conversation, and it's kind of an ongoing conversation with a friend of mine who so desperately wants to be an influencer.
I do not want to do that, but yeah.
Correct. And most people don't. Most people see it as a necessity because they're being told to, right? If you remember the early days of social media, they were like, you have to be on Twitter, you have to be on Pinterest, you have to be on MySpace, you have to be on Facebook, you have to post on all of them, or sure they're not gonna have a successful business, right? That was kind of like, be on everything, it doesn't matter. So I would first say that's the most common type of person. None of us exist naturally as this like braggadocious, megalomaniac type demigod person. We don't. We actually, most of us cringe at the idea of doing it.
Yes.
It's like going to the gym, right? And we don't want to do it, but we know that if we get in the habit, at least it becomes a little less painful. And maybe if that is our goal, right? If it serves a purpose, then that's the right thing to do. So the first thing I would do is say, like, what is more important than anything is understanding that, like, the more experiences that you have, the more stories that you have for people to relate to, right? So the first and foremost is live in the real world and this is I can only tell you my lived experience. Celebrate other people on your experience, and that will naturally pay dividends, right? Like, how can you constantly celebrate other people? How can your story be told through other people's, and that relative connection, right? Whether it is work, whether it's how you're spending your volunteer time, whether it's, these are all small things. Like, how can I lift somebody else? I said, I'm going through, our house had a water pipe burst. So we had to be out, right? So I was like, how can I make this awesome? That's kind of my general, like, how do I make this awesome? And instead of going on and being like, life sucks, we left, house. It's like, one of my friends is a realtor, and he connected me with a contractor, and out of, the 10 of the weekend. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to start with something negative. I'm going to start with something positive, right? Hey, we found this amazing because, my friend who's the realtors, I get to pump his tires a little bit and still tell the story of what I'm going through. And you better believe that people were like, oh my gosh, finding a good contractor is amazing. Oh, I went through this, it was horrible. So, in reality, that's who I am. That's what I'm going through, and whether that's harder things, right? So if you're volunteering for somebody else's cause, there's just some general life things in here that I feel are good rules to follow. And I think that you will find the best version of yourself that you are actually comfortable with sharing. And that would kind of be, my answer to your question is find the version of you that you enjoy, that brings other people in, that's two-way instead of one-way. I think you already did a great job of it. Hey, I'm curious about AI. Like, you're not coming in here and saying, here's what I do. If you enter a room with curiosity, and like, you will usually exit with a couple friends. People gravitate towards that. So, it's finding the balance. And again, it doesn't have to be broadcast. It does not have to be, that's even for me, like, I don't really post that much. One, because I think that when we say something, it is there for eternity. I don't like that. The reality is that there are very few things that I have believed in my life that have never changed, if anything. And if you're not changing your mind, you're probably not growing. So, I would release yourself of some of those things, and just find what's comfortable for you and bring other people in, because like most of life, it's more fun when it's shared.
Yeah, you made some really good points, and like, yeah, I've thought about those kinds of things before. Like, if I had a client asking me like, hey, I'm going to need you to do X, Y, or Z, or get out of my comfort zone and be on video for something, which I've done for different things, like well, I'm helping someone else out, like I'm like most of my clients are my friends and stuff like that. But then when it comes to like me, I'm like, I'm not putting myself out there for that, but yeah, those are some really good points. And the other question, I don't know if anyone else has any other any questions. I'll let you guys go because I just asked one, but I do have another question for you.
Floor is yours.
All right. So on the intersectionality between AI and storytelling and personal branding, like I've had some, dabble in SEO for clients, right? And I have written some AI slop that, like, if I had to sit down and read that, like I'd close the tab and like go to something else. But just like every marketer or whatever got various tools to tackle these kinds of things. And I'm using tools to automatically optimize and input keyword densities and stuff like that in there. And like they're ranking nationally, right? But like it's not good content. So like when you go back to, and this is a conversation I was just having with someone the other day, when you talk about like building authority in, whether it's as a person or as a brand, right? You want to be like authoritative on a subject, right? I feel like with how, like, I guess it's all depending on your goals too, but most people, if they're doing blog posts or something like that, it's to drive business to their website, right? The internet runs on that economy of like attention, and people, like, businesses aren't paying teams to write blog posts out of the kindness of their heart to share their thoughts. They're trying to increase traffic to their website, right? And the most effective way to do that is to optimize it, blah, blah, blah. And it sucks, right? It's terrible and I hate it, but I'm just playing like part of the game. So like first question is like, where do you see that going, right? Like, where do you see that going? And how do you see like, and then B, like, what would your advice be to someone that's trying to create a personal brand and get discovered online? Would you just try to speak in an authentic tone and write like you would normally write and just try to provide valuable, relevant content to whatever you're speaking about? Or is it a mixture of both? Because like, I feel like if you've already got an audience, you've already got traffic, like it's one thing to just like, post whatever you want and write whatever you want. People are going to come to you because you already have that base built up. But if you don't have that base, you're trying to get discovered. I feel like you got to play the game a little bit. I just want to hear what you have to say.
That's a lot. I'm going to try and tackle it.
Sorry.
So I'm going to give you, so first of all, I think what I heard was mostly where do I see like SEO style content in mass going? Not far. The internet's smart. You're right. The internet's a little bit like the stock market. You go, well, I think I can get ahead of it. And they're like, sorry, it already adjusted for that. Right. And so this is, again, and I will say, I think it's important to note that like, this book is not these concepts that I wrote about are actually geared towards young entrepreneurs, right? That's the original lecture series. So like, it doesn't really go, well, how does but at the end of the day, right, telling your story and all this is content. This is you selling, this idea, understanding how to, all this kind of stuff. To me, like it's going to become antiquated very fast. And the example I will give you is if you search on Google right now, like peacock or something, half of those images are going to be AI generated, right? Like you're going to see more and more of this, and we're very quickly going to be, I can already do it. It happened yesterday. My buddy sent me an email. I go, he goes, can you look over this? I go, when you have the time to write one, I'll look over it. And they're like, I was like, okay,
yeah.
I'm not going to edit your chat. And again, I've been sitting with it for, a long time now. So it's easy for me. It's going to become very easy for everyone else, including, I used to have a site that would automatically rewrite other articles, right? And rank it for, okay, well, now those get downranked. So the answer is always the same. Be your authentic self, present both authentically and in a vulnerable sense, right? Know that every 8 billion people on this planet goes through similar things that you go through, regardless of the degree of life they're in. And when we make those connections, now all of a sudden I'm on that ride. And I think the people who do, and I'm going to go back to, when it comes to making content that is labor intensive, right? We're looking to get back our most valuable resource, right? We're always looking to save time. So the problem is that if you're looking to save time while you're connecting with people authentically, it's probably not going to work, because it does take time, and we actually recognize that. We can recognize when someone has a lipstick channel and they're they go, well, yeah, I got 2 million subscribers and they just make lipstick. I could do that. I go, you're right, you could, but you don't, right? They've been doing this every week for 3 years before you saw them. So they have the discipline. It's not that it's easy. The task itself is easy. The repetition is hard, right? So writing is easy, right? It already is the easy part. The repetition of injecting yourself as the editor is going to be hard. And I think that's like, when it comes to relevant content, like it's just, again, it's finding your audience and serving them in the best way you can. And this is like where the, does the dog wag the tail or the tail wag the dog? And you see some YouTube creators that drop out because they're like, I'm not actually creating for me anymore. I'm creating for the clicks. I'm creating for the algorithm.
Yeah.
And none of these things are by themselves like bad, because it's an arc, right? It's a story. I had to build an audience, so I played the game. Then I was able to refine my voice. In that refinement, I lost some people, I gained some people, I lost some algorithm, I gained some algorithm. And then I evolved into being this mature person or brand, whatever, interchangeable. And again, if you don't take people on that journey, you're selling yourself short. Like, be imperfect. It's okay. This is where I think, you hear a lot of times like, oh, I'm not ready yet. My buddy wants to sell a show and he's like, well, it's not quite ready yet. I have to cut this and I'm going to go out to Tennessee and I'm going to film this thing. And I'm like, you're going to do all that before you've talked to one person who's done it before to see if you're on the right. Like, we've all sucked before. We've all been there. Like, we've all asked for help and not gotten it more times than we have. So I think that is, when we talk about relevant and taking people along that ride, like, that's it. We're improvising. We're making it up along the way. It's okay. All of us are. And that's where we start relating to what someone's going through and going, you're just like me, or you're not like me at all, right? Like, you're just allowing that conversation, that dialogue to go on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, something I struggle with, and I've had conversations with multiple people about, and it sounds like you'd be a really good person to ask that question. And I think you answered it really well. Yeah, if anyone in this room has had a conversation with me, I am not shy, and I am not uncomfortable in sharing, personal things or whatever else. I mean, yeah, getting out of my comfort zone and maybe doing that online with strangers is a different thing, but yeah.
No, I mean, look, it's really great to think about. And again, this is part of the evolution, right? We've become a little like scared to move because we're afraid of making something, saying the wrong thing. I mean, look, there's a lot in here and there's a lot to unpack. I just think that it is always worth understanding. And that's why, like, a big part of it is like, hey, you got to know where you came from to know where you're going, right? You have to kind of reckon with, who am I and how did I become this person? That's really hard. That's a really deep question, and most people don't want to face that because it's hard. It's hard to actually say like, hey, gosh, I went through this thing. It was really tough. My boss did this thing to me and I was defensive about it. And, at the time I threw a fit, and I talked shit to all my friends about it. And, now like 6 years later, I kind of see that like they kind of named a habit of mine, or they called my temper out and I wasn't ready for that. I don't know where that comes from. Okay, well, actually, I do know where it comes from, so now I can be aware of it. I think that all of these things are part of, it's this blurred line that we don't, this blurred line that we now exist in between business, and our personal lives. The clock doesn't end at 5, right? People keep emailing us. We think about, like, these are all, it is whether we like it or not. For a lot of us that don't work in a factory, it's a part of who we are for good reason, right? We've been given the opportunity to infuse who we are, right? This is the privilege, right? The privilege is that we've actually gotten to choose why, what we're doing. I think that's important to acknowledge. I know we're running short on time.
Oh, no, we're fine. Aubrey, did you see the question?
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to, Don put a question in the chat. I'll just read it aloud. He specializes in partnership marketing, social and cause marketing, and has done contract work for 10 years or more as one person. And he says, my interest is in nationwide relocation for major corporations. I'm a fractional marketing director, business journalist, business developer, but I'm needing suggestions for explaining why I'm interested in relocating and working for major well-known companies like Ben & Jerry's or Tom's. It seems like a big task to compete. So if you could speak to that a little bit. I think, Don, it looks like you're here.
Let me synthesize for a second here. So you're saying you're applying to these companies, you're having conversation with these companies, and you want to personally relocate and you want to make that a part. Like, why would you do that? Is that the question?
I think you're on mute, but if you're driving, don't come off mute.
Yeah. I'll just run with that, and I can be relatively succinct. There is an answer there, right? and whatever that answer is, like, that's your truth. Like, I think that this concept of like trying to come up with the right answer is like the wrong answer. God bless my brother. He has worked for the same company his whole life, and so he's never really had to interview for a job. But part of what he had said to me when I was interviewing, or I said, oh, I'm a little worried about if you Google me, some of these things happen, and he goes, do you really want to work for a company that doesn't accept you for who you are? Right. And at some points I'd say like, yeah, but I really want a job. And at other points, you realize that there is something endearing about that concept. And the challenge to you is, do you really know the source of that answer, right? Because there's multitudes there. There isn't one answer. And I think that part of that is understanding the multitude, reading the room, seeing where the person you're talking to can relate. Have they moved? Did they move for the job? Understanding those kinds of, is it for family? Is it for adventure? Is it because, you want to live I don't know. The challenge is find the truth of that answer and then be able to peel it out in a way that whoever you are talking to can relate to. And I think that will put you at least in a point of authenticity with whoever you're working with. And it opens the gate. They go, you know what? Like, I like you. Even if you're wrong with the job, they're like, I get it. It makes sense. Why anyone would want to leave Nebraska, I don't know. But, got to be an answer.
Awesome. Thanks for that. We are running up against time, so I just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone who joined us. Thank you, Ross, for just all of your wisdom and for synthesizing your book so quickly, but then also expounding upon all these different areas. Is just a joy to hear your insights on everything. So thank you.
Well, thank you guys. It's always good to see you again. And find me on LinkedIn. Chris, let's follow up. We have some more AI stuff to talk about. I'd love to wrap with you on it.
Yeah. Speaking of not using social, I'm pretty sure I bugged you on LinkedIn after On Brand. Let me see here.
We'll see. There was an air tag that kept beeping after I left. I don't know.
It was Chris for sure.
All right. Thank you guys so much. This has been so fun.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thanks,
All right.
Ross.
See y'all
Thanks,
later.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.